All right, guys, welcome to the show. We are talking about stocks rising. I got 10 players here whose stocks are rising as we get into this, well, I would say second half of the season. We're going to NFL Fantasy Week 11. I'm going to give you guys 10 players who could really be league winners, but also whose stock is rising. They're heating up, and that can be maintained. Now, a lot of players have 1 week type wonder type of games. So you're like, oh, they had a good week. Is that sustainable for the rest of the season? And I kind of left those people out, those 1 week wonders. These are guys that I think could relatively stay the same in regards to how they've been performing lately. So how to put it easily, these guys could stay hot to the end of the season. So fantasy players whose stocks are rising, going to dive into that here with you. Give you 10 players in depth. Going to be talking about them. So I'm excited to talk about that, guys. Now, there is a release today, guys, of Real Truck. They created the Truck It list where they're giving back to amazing community heroes, amazing players. You see them on the field. Kittle, Kelsey, and Dak Prescott are given away. Today's episode features George Kittle giving away a truck. You got to see this, guys. It's an amazing, inspirational story. Go watch the episode, guys. thetruckitlist.com. I've linked it below as well. Go to Real Truck's bio on Instagram. Check it out. The link in the bio at Real Truck. Go check it out. I've also linked it below. Watch this preview right now.
This is way too amazing of an opportunity to be able to gift this to somebody that is deserving of it. Pat spent a lot of his life serving others, whether it was in the military or being a school teacher. What happens when someone who spent their whole life giving to others finally gets something in return? Wow, it's your truck. This is the story of unsung heroes, amazing trucks, and dreams that come true. I'm George Kittle, and this is the Truck It List.
So there's the preview, guys. The first episode is out right now. Go check it out, guys. Thetruckitlist.com. I've also linked it below or in the Real Trucks bio. Amazing story. Go watch. I love to hear stories like this where players are giving back. This is absolutely amazing. Absolutely love it. And thanks to Real Truck as well. All right, go watch it. Now, let's talk into these stock rising players right now. Starting off with the first one here. I was high on him at the beginning of the season. I thought he'd have a great season, but he didn't perform to where I wanted him to perform. He was actually benched. New coaching comes in, puts him back on the field, and guess who I'm talking about? The guy I'm talking about is Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan having himself a game in Week 10. Moving forward, I think he can maintain a solid and steady fantasy football pace, knowing that his job is on the line. And we saw it. A 37-year-old running for 39 yards on the ground, or 38 yards on the ground, and 1 rushing touchdown. He also had a passing touchdown last game, 222 yards passing, and he looked vibrant. He looked young. He looked explosive. Jonathan Taylor also getting in the groove as well. So I'm excited for Matt Ryan moving forward as a backup quarterback with some upside or a second quarterback in a 2-quarterback league. I think this is relatively sustainable. He's got that rapport now with Paris Campbell. He's got that rapport with his wide receivers. I think he's in the groove. And I think moving forward, he's going to be a safe player moving forward, okay? And his stock has risen. You can't deny that he's got a little bit of fire under his butt right now. He's ready to go. So Matt Ryan, stock rising. If you're desperate for a quarterback, could be a viable option. I know he may be available in a bunch of leagues. Maybe a good trade target if you're desperate for a quarterback, especially, like I said, in a 2-quarterback league. So Matt Ryan is on my radar. The Colts on my radar. Stocks rising. Again, I don't have him here on the list. We know Justin Fields' stock's rising. When the quarterback stock rises, typically, that goes hand in hand with the offense. So the offense looks better as a whole. So we'll talk about that as well here because I got some, beneficiaries of these quarterbacks stock rising, including the second player here, Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor had a 22-point game last game. Now, what I like here about Jonathan Taylor is, again, he was a top prospect going into this year. First overall, the Chiefs told you to draft him first overall. I factored in a decline. Didn't know the decline would be as big as it has been with Jonathan Taylor, but a bounce back week last week, 147 yards on the ground, 24.3 fantasy points. Bounce back PPR numbers. I always talk 1-point PPR. He's back, getting a rushing touchdown. He looked explosive. And again, maybe because it's the spark of Matt Ryan, maybe new coaching, maybe they need to get it in gear. he has a chip on his shoulder as well to perform to kind of where he performed last year. So moving forward, I think we have a strong finish here with Jonathan Taylor, barring any type of injury. Hopefully he stays healthy. Could be a strong finish and a league winner here, but definitely the stock is rising again here with Jonathan Taylor. And again, it could be the whole Matt Ryan, Jonathan Taylor, Colts ignition here, new coaching type situation here. But I'm liking Jonathan Taylor. All right. Now, if you guys have not checked it out yet, go to my episode right now. I just did the optimal starts at each position. That's going to help you guys with who to start this week. And again, some of these guys are in the optimal starts for this week. All right. Coming in number 3 here. And again, I'm not a fan of him. I talked to him in my league winners show. Jeff Wilson's stock is rising here. 22.3 points in week 10. And moving forward, I think he's going to be a viable RB2 with some upside. And one thing I look at particularly is the volume when you're looking at any of these players, right? So Jeff Wilson, as of right now, again, things can change. Things do change. Things will change. Because again, he was never, years to wow us were not wowed. When I look at this guy and I see the way that Miami has run the ball, I see 17 attempts for him in week 10, and I see 8 attempts for Raheem Mostert in week 10. And I'm seeing an average of 7 yards per carry and a touchdown. They both got a touchdown, but Jeff Wilson, 119 yards on the ground, seemed to be the guy getting more attempts, getting more volume. Could he be a league winner? Possibly. I talk about that, right? But again, I'm not overly excited because he's had years to wow, so we're not wow. But either way, going back to the episode of what we call it, stock is rising for Jeff Wilson. Next guy here, tight end, I talked about him in the league winner as well. Got to mention him again, give him an honorable mention again because his stock is rising, is Cole Kmet. We talked about it. This goes hand in hand with Justin Fields. And when I look at a guy at a tight end particularly, and you want that consistency, I think Cole Kmet can give you some consistency at the tight end position. When I pull up the numbers by PPR, 5.2 points 4 weeks ago in week 7, 9.1, not the greatest. Then he went 22 and 23 points, respectively, the past 2 weeks. So, Cole Kmet, right? He was absent from practice this week. His thigh was bothering him, but he's on the roll. He's been on a roll lately. He's going to continue to emerge with Justin Fields and his explosive offense as a red zone target, having 5 touchdowns over the past 3 games. That's something that's very attractive to me as a tight end owner. So try to acquire Cole Kmet. I think he's looking consistently good and a guy whose stock is rising and has been consistent the past couple weeks. So Cole Kmet, consider him. Again, let's talk about this guy here who's kind of been down all year. The guy I'm talking about is Aaron Rodgers. I think his stock is rising. I think he's finally found the receiver that he needs in Christian Watson. 3 touchdown game for Watson. A void that the Packers have been trying to fill all season. A guy I told you to stash in Christian Watson. So I would definitely, and again, I don't have him here on the list as Watson, but his stock is rising as well. So I got to mention, I put him on the cover of this artwork. But again, that goes without saying. But Aaron Rodgers, again, Christian Watson, both those guys hand in hand. Aaron Rodgers' stock definitely rising. And again, when you look at him this past week, just under 20 points, 224 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And, didn't have a lot of 2 rushing attempts for 4 yards, didn't get it done on the ground. But again, getting into that groove, starting to throw some touchdowns, starting to get that swagger back, and it's very needed as the Packers definitely to start to string some wins together to be in playoff contention. So Aaron Rodgers, I think he's revived. I think he's back. I think he's in the groove. Aaron Rodgers' stock rising. Next guy here is Christian Kirk. Again, we're seeing consistent numbers out of him moving forward. A sleeper I told you guys all to draft going into the season and had a decent start at the beginning of the season. Really fell off, had a couple dud games, including week 8, which is a dud, which is a 4-point game, but has redeemed himself the past 2 weeks, including having an explosive and amazing week 10, 31.5 points. So when you look at a guy like Christian Kirk, he can and will and should be a viable option to start every week as a wide receiver 2 with upside. Looking at the targets, 10, 7, 9, and 12 over the past 4 games. I'm liking the targets. I'm liking the volume. I'm liking the points. I'm liking the 3 touchdowns over the past 2 games. Hopefully this trend is something that we see continuing to rise. Stock rising, Christian Kirk. He's heating up, and he is going to be on fire if this keeps up. Loving it. Next guy here, again, not a fan of this guy, not a fan of Jeff Wilson in regards to years to wow us. We're not wow, but we cannot deny the opportunity. We cannot deny the week 9, 24.9 points, the 24 attempts, and the 2 touchdowns from Kenyon Drake coming off a bye week. Kenyon Drake is a guy who, again, is going into a good matchup this week. And when I look at a guy like Kenyon Drake, I'm not impressed, but again, opportunity knocks. And this week, guys, And when I look at Kenny Drake this week, Baltimore has, and who is Baltimore playing? I think it's a decent matchup this week. I got to take a look at it and say, hey, coming off that big point game, it's got to be good. He's playing Carolina. So not a bad matchup for Kenny Drake. Again, go check out the Starts and Sits episode. Kenny and Drake could actually end up being a league winner. I never thought I'd say that if he stays healthy and they feed him the ball. Again, the 24 attempts is what's really attracting to me to a guy that has years to wow us. We're not wowed. So Kenny and Drake, again, be cautious, but if you are desperate for a running back, it could actually be consistent going towards the end of the season. I'm not really 100% sold, but the attempts, the volume is very attractive to me. And again, could it continue? Very possible with the injury of Gus Edwards, as long as Gus Edwards stays limited. Justice Hill, all these guys, they're kept at bay. Years to wow us, we're not wowed. Then Kenny and Drake could emerge, and stock is rising. Three more here on the that have to be mentioned here. Tony Pollard. When I take a look at Tony Pollard versus Zeke Elliott has been sidelined. He should be coming back. If he does come back, that's obviously going to affect Tony Pollard a little bit. Then we're looking more of a split. But when I look at it on the season, Tony Pollard still less attempts than Zeke, 103 to 109, but he's bridging that gap, 6 touchdowns to 4 touchdowns, 20 in favor of Tony Pollard. His stock is definitely rising. As long as Zeke Elliott stays sidelined and continues to not play to kind of where he needs to be, he's going to lose that job. Now, this is a gap that's been bridging over the past 2-3 years, where Pollard continues to grow in regards to attempts. I talked about this prior to the season, and Zeke continues to drop. I thought that this would be a slightly bounce back year for Zeke, but on the contrary, it's actually favored Tony Pollard, and it's moving towards his direction in regards to getting more volume, all right? Getting more attempts, getting more limelight, and Zeke is kind of fading off into the sunset. So Tony Pollard, his stock is rising, and will that continue to happen? Very possible. I think Tony Pollard will stay consistent. He'll be a solid flex play, or RB2 with some upside. Going to be consistent throughout the entire and the rest of the season. When I look at it from a game-to-game basis, his lowest game was a 4.2 pointer week 1, and then he had a 7.2 pointer week 6. But he's been consistent. He actually had a 1.8 pointer week 4. He's had 3 dud games, but the past 3 weeks he's been consistent: 12.9, 33.7, 21.8. Again, big factor was Zeke being sidelined. So we're looking at a 12 to 15 point floor every single game. Again, he's had a couple dud weeks, but I think he's still a safe play, especially value play in DFS, depending on the matchup. All right. Tony Pollard, stock rising. 2 more players here whose stocks are rising. Before I do, guys, head on over to prizepicks.com. Use code DFSLion. Use that code DFSLion to double your first deposit up to $100. And it's very easy to play. For example, here, guys, Derrick Henry. I confused stud with dud here. Derrick Henry, I was just talking about Zeke, so he was in my mind. Derrick Henry, 99.5 rushing yards this week. Is it going to be more or less? Aaron Jones, 60.5, more or less. And Jamal Williams, 60.5, more or less. And it's that easy, guys. There's a couple players. Select 2 to 5 of them. Pick them more or less, and it's easy to win. PrizePicks.com, DFSLion is the code to get all the perks on sign up. Go sign up, create it, and it's a fun way to play DFS. I use it. Super fun. PrizePicks.com, DFSLion. Go try it out. Okay, last 2 players here. Stocks are rising. I talked about one of them in my league winners. It's Paris Campbell. Seems to be the primary target of Matt Ryan. I know I got 3 Colts here, but the Colts offense seems to be waking up, similar to the Packers offense, similar to other offenses that I mentioned, including the Bears. Certain offenses are starting to wake up, and that's a really good thing with the players involved. So Cole Kmet's the beneficiary of the Bears. We talked about Taylor. Now we're talking about Paris Campbell, a guy that seems to be a primary target, although I still think that Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman are going to be integrated in that offense. But at the end of the day, right now, Paris Campbell, stock rising. And finally, Robinson. I'm going to keep saying that name. Washington Commanders, Brian Robinson, win over the Eagles. They've got some swagger moving forward. 26 attempts, 186 yards. The guy was getting it done. I can't deny that Brian Robinson was getting the volume the last game. Now I'm just going to pull up the stats here again in regards to 26 attempts, 86 yards. I apologize. There's 26 attempts, 86 yards last game, 3.3 yards per carry, and a touchdown, 14.6 points. So when you look at Robinson, 86 yards. I had a slash in my notes. I had a slash 86. This is what happens when you do, podcasting. Sometimes you make notes and you can't even read your own writing. 86 yards, 26 attempts. Now, that doesn't look good on a 3.3 yards per carry perspective, but when I look at it from a volume perspective, now he in that game, week 10, 26 attempts, Gibson had 14 attempts. Now, Gibson had 3.1 yards per carry and a touchdown, but what I was liking is that Brian Robinson can only get better. You heard the announcers talk about it during that game. They said Brian Robinson is a guy coming off that injury. He actually stated it that he's not still 100% from getting shot in the leg. So give the guy credit that he's finally getting integrated, and finally we can start seeing more volume, more attempts out of him, and he's going into a good matchup this week versus Houston. So Brian Robinson, stock rising, good matchup with Houston, who gives up the most points per running back. This is an amazing opportunity for him. So if you have Robinson, start him this week. If you have Gibson, look for his stock to go down as Robinson starts emerging. I like Robinson towards the end of the year. I think he's going to be awesome. I think he's going to be viable. I think he could be a league winner, and I think his stock is definitely rising. All right. Matt Ryan, Jonathan Taylor, Jeff Wilson, Cole Kmet, Aaron Rodgers, Christian Kirk, Kenny Drake, Tony Pollard, Gibson, and Robinson, more Robinson, and Paris Campbell, stock rising, guys. And of course, Christian Watson. All right. If you're new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe, drop a comment below. Let me know who you think stock is rising in your opinion, or you got on your team and you're excited that their stock is rising. Love to get your feedback. Drop a comment below. And of course, prizepicks.com. DFS Lion. Go try it out. We'll talk soon, guys. I'm out.